Good evening. Welcome to the Herndon Town Council Public Session, May 23rd, 2013.
Good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First up this evening, we have several sets of minutes. I'll call for separate motions. Is there a motion to approve the May 2nd work session minutes?
So moved.
Second. Abstain.
Discussion on the motion. Grace will abstain. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, and one abstention. Is there a motion to approve the May 9th public hearing minutes?
So moved.
I'll second it. Oh, sorry.
Discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. And finally, is there a motion to approve the May 16th work session minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion on the motion?
I'll abstain.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and that motion carries. We have one presentation this evening. It is a proclamation to recognize Memorial Day, May 29th, 2017, and I'll recognize Councilmember McKenna to read the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A Town of Herndon proclamation recognizing Memorial Day, May 29th, 2017. Memorial Day is observed each year on the last Monday in May and originated after the American Civil War to commemorate the Union and Confederate soldiers who had died during the war. By the 20th century, Memorial Day was extended to honor all Americans who died while serving in our nation's armed forces. During this holiday, we emphasize that the invaluable freedoms and securities that citizens of the United States enjoy are a direct result of the bloodshed and continual vigilance of the United States Armed Forces over the course of our nation's history, and honor and preserve the legacy of these great Americans. Therefore, the Mayor and Town Council of the Town of Herndon hereby recognize Monday, May 29, 2017, as Memorial Day in the Town of Herndon. Express our deepest appreciation to the men and women in uniform who have paid the ultimate price to defend the United States and the principles in which it was founded, and admire their unwavering devotion to our greatest generation, or to our great generation. Further, the Mayor and Council of the Town of Herndon, Virginia, hereby implore all Americans to pay a tribute and show gratitude towards the men and women in the armed forces and their families throughout the display of flags of red, white, and blue ribbons throughout the month of May, and especially Memorial Day, May 29, 2017. Further, the Mayor and Town Council of the Town of Herndon, Virginia, hereby encourage all individuals to honor Memorial Day with the appropriate events and activities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Discussion on the proclamation. Mr. McKenna.
Yeah, this holiday is something that's very near and dear to me. My father was a Sullivan child from the Sullivan rule. He lost two brothers in World War II, and I had an uncle that served in World War II. He was in the 29th, they call it the Bloody Bucket. He was in D-Day, and then he had to fight in the Battle of the Bulge. And without their sacrifices for us, I wouldn't be here as a councilman today. So I hold those things and the sacrifices that my family made for me very dear and true to my heart. So to everyone that serves, to everyone that has served, and everyone that will serve, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. There's nothing I can do to repay your debt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In addition to those comments, I want to thank the American Legion and particularly the Kirby family for the efforts that they have made to celebrate Memorial Day here in Herndon in the past few years, and I look forward to seeing that tradition continue next year.
Thank you. Other comments? Thank you. I want to follow up on Mr. Davidson's comments as well. This year, the American Legion was unable to hold their observation that they typically have in Chestnut Grove Cemetery on Memorial Day Monday. So we did not want Memorial Day to go unnoticed in the town of Herndon, so the council and I are hosting the first ever Memorial Day family gathering on Sunday, May 28th at the Town Hall Square in downtown Herndon, right in front of the depot. The gathering will begin at 9 a.m. and across the street, Rolling Thunder motorcycles line up in front of the fire station and take off for D.C. About 9:15 that morning. So we're hoping to have lots of families and neighbors come out. We'll pass out American flags to wave as the bikes go by. Following their departure, we'll have a color guard and speakers to commemorate Memorial Day in front of the depot. Additionally, Mr. Davidson mentioned Mr. David Kirby, former councilman, who has always provided the Avenue of Flags in Chestnut Grove Cemetery. That will still continue this year. They'll be up at sunup and will come down at sundown all through Chestnut Grove Cemetery on Memorial Day Monday. So we hope that you will come out and pay your respects and take a look at that as well. Any other comments before the presentation? I don't believe anyone from the American Legion was able to be here today, but I would like to still hold a presentation, invite down anyone in the audience or on the dais who has served in the armed forces to please come down for the presentation. And Mr. McKenna. Barbara, that was pretty smooth.
Thank you very much.
We'll be sure to present the proclamation at the Memorial Day event on Sunday. This brings us to the comments portion of the agenda. Mr. Town Manager, are there any comments for us this evening?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor. We are very pleased to inform you that Herndon Centennial Golf Course was selected to host a Capital Area Golf Tour event on July 1st and 2nd. This is a competition on the junior golf circuit. The tour consists of kids aged 8 to 17 trying for scholarships, and they're trying to get in front of folks, college recruiters and that sort of thing. This is an excellent for the course. It will bring a large number of people from the D.C. area to Herndon, and it really will help us showcase the great job Gene Fleming has done out at the Centennial Golf Course. Thank you.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Mr. Davidson, any comments for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight on the consent agenda, the town council and mayor have the opportunity to appoint citizen representatives to the Herndon Parkway Committee. I'm very happy to have that on the agenda tonight. I'm looking forward to establishing that committee and starting with meetings soon. The committee will meet in public sessions, so everyone is invited to come and attend. Participation will be up to the rules that we established, the bylaws that we established the very first evening. So I'm happy for that opportunity, and thank you for everyone who applied and indicated interest in that committee.
Thank you. Mr. McKenna.
Thank you. A couple things. I made a visit to the Capitol, D.C. Capitol, with Councilwoman Friedrichs last Wednesday, with the Virginia Municipal League and National League of Cities, but I'll let you go into detail about that. So it was a very interesting trip, and I had a great time doing that. Also, I was just appointed to the board of the Herndon Village Network, an organization to help senior population continue to live independently, with giving rides and helping them with much more than that. To anyone watching at home, there is currently, you have about an hour and 50 left to go down to Chipotle. Mention the Herndon Village Network when you cash out, and 50% of the bill will go towards that cause. If you've been there already, so thank you very much, but if you're watching now, you can go there now till 9 o'clock, so let everyone know there. Also want to thank the DPW and police departments for their great work on Friday Night Live and at the farmers markets. People have been stopping me, thanking me for their efforts, and I also have been getting emails regarding their work and forwarding them on to staff, so just know that it's definitely appreciated. And then finally, I also want to wish my podcast co-host, Mr. Brett Simons, and his new wife, Kathy, congratulations on their nuptials on Sunday. And I hope he's enjoying his mini honeymoon in beautiful Ocean City, New Jersey, or in Maryland. So that's all.
I'm sure they're watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly what they'd be doing.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say anything, though.
Thank you. Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you. I want to take a moment to thank Parks and Recs for organizing a fantastic Bike to Work Day last Friday. We had almost 500 people come through both in the morning and the afternoon. Thanks to all the businesses that sponsored the Herndon Pit Stop, ranging from A1 Cycling, Green Lizard, Northwest Federal Credit Union, and more. If you are a cyclist and you haven't had an opportunity to bike our portion of the trail or to sign up for Bike to Work Day, make sure you look for it. It's always the second or third week in May. So thanks to Parks and Recs. Also, tomorrow night is the Technology and Arts Competition Award Reception. It was a program that I engendered when I was president of the then Council for the Arts of Herndon. It is an all-digital art competition for every high school here in Fairfax County, and it really is able to showcase some of the wonderful work that our students are doing in this exciting new field with a lot of commercial viability. So it's 6:30 to 8:30 tomorrow at Art Space, so stop on by. You will be amazed at what these young, talented people can do, some of which can't even drive.
Thank you. Ms. Friedrichs.
As Councilmember McKenna. As Councilmember McKenna mentioned, the two of us went downtown and participated in the Virginia Municipal League's organization's Federal Advocacy Committee. We had the opportunity to meet with a couple of members of Congress and a lot of staff members and discuss the possible effects of the new president's budget on our budget. It was very enlightening, and I look forward to keeping in contact with them because they seem to have a really good eye on what's going on. So that was very important, very necessary, and also, Jeff, what is your name again?
It's Councilman McKenna.
Councilman McKenna and I deeply enjoyed it, even though I can't remember his name.
Ms. Olam.
I hope I don't have that problem tonight. I'm just knocking off my speakerphone there. I'm just really excited that next week, finally, the festival's going to be here again. Looking forward to it. And I hope that we're getting all the rain out of the way. I think Cindy brought it early so that it won't be here next Thursday when we open up for the festival. So, counting.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Sure. I just want to comment on the Optimist Club of Herndon, right? So the Optimist Club focuses on youth sports programs. It's been a part of the community in developing youth and since 1961. They also offer scholarships, so I'm part of that committee and looking forward to presenting those scholarship awardees to mostly Town of Herndon residents and also a few others from the greater Herndon area on June 5th at our own golf course. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to remind everyone about the Herndon Police Department Youth Police Academy that's coming up this summer. Registration is open. You can get information on our website, herndon-va.gov. It's a free week-long summer experience from June 26th through 30th. It's open to anyone between the ages of 14 and 17. Applications must be submitted by June 5th, and registration information, like I said, is on the website. We will, of course, be closed on Monday the 29th for Memorial Day. Check the website for information on your refuse pickup and golf course and community center hours. And next Tuesday is a fifth Tuesday of the month, so there will be no town council meeting, so we'll see you back in the conference room in 2 weeks. This is the portion of the agenda that's reserved for anyone who has comments for the council that are not a public hearing item or listed on our agenda. You have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. When the green light comes on, you're free to speak, and when the red light comes on, please try to wrap up. If you are here for the either of the public hearing items, that is not this is not the time to speak on those items. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and speak? Ms. Geary.
So short. Good afternoon. I am Tia Geary from 913 Eldon Street. I love Herndon. It is my hometown. Although I have some concerns and ideas for Herndon. First, I'm going to start with a concern. I go to the bus stop on School Street, and there is a sign that states that cars need to stop, but it's not always happening. And so sometimes people are speeding past there, and it's kind of hard to get across the street. Also on Eldon Street, it's very hard to get across the street. Madam Mayor and me our neighbors. So when we're going to Friday Night Live or taking a walk, it's very hard to get across the street, and it's scary and concerning at the same time. I also think there should be more recycling bins around Herndon. I think we should have signs that state what should go in the recycling bins and what should not. I think that makes more work for the garbage men and recycling men. I also think that we should have water barrels to kind of use the water twice, and we can water the green or the flowers in Herndon to make Herndon a little bit more green. An idea to solve the concerns of the concerns of crossing the street. I think we should have more signs that state that you need to stop, so that people just have more of an idea. Thank you for letting me come. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and speak on any item that's not a public hearing item? Nobody wants to follow you, Tia. You had good ideas. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll make sure that our DPW and our police department hear your concerns, and we'll see if there's something we can do about those. Okay. Thank you for coming. Okay. That does bring us to our first public hearing item, which is Resolution 17G50, which is to consider the appeal of the HPRB's decision on HPRB case number 17-10-715 Drainsville Road. I'll open the public hearing on this resolution and call for disclosures by council, of which I will go first. For the record, I'm an owner of real estate at 911 Eldon Street, which is in the Heritage District. I am able to participate in the discussion and action on this application fairly, objectively, and in the public interest, and I filed the appropriate disclosure forms with the town clerk and the town attorney. Madam Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Madam Mayor, for the record, I am an owner of real estate at 620 Madison Street, which is in the Heritage District. I am able to participate in the discussion and action on this application fairly, objectively, and in the public interest, and I have filed the appropriate disclosure with the town clerk and town attorney.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call first on our town attorney, Lisa Gates, to review the process for an appeal, because it is very different from the typical items that we consider as a council. So, Madam Town Attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very simply and briefly, the process for an appeal of a Historic Preservation Review Board decision is detailed in Section 78-202.76 of the Town Code. The Council will conduct a full and impartial public hearing on the matter before rendering any decision. The Council will also apply the same procedure and standards that are established for the HPRB in Section 78-514 of the Town Code. The applicant in this matter will state the grounds for the appeal and identify any materials or evidence from the record to support the appeal. Town staff shall be given opportunity to respond, as well as any other necessary and appropriate persons. The Council may affirm, reverse, or modify the decision of the board in whole or in part, or may remand the case to the board. The Town Council may not reverse or modify the decision unless there is evidence in the record that the decision of the HPRB is not correct based on the review standards in Section 78-514 of the Town Code. The decision of the Council shall be final, subject to the provisions of Section 78-202.76 of the Town Code regarding the right of appeal to Circuit Court of the county. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So this is a public hearing. I would like to invite down the appellants to come forward to state for the record the grounds for the appeal and to identify any material and evidence that you may have to support the appeal. Good evening.
Hi, folks. Thanks for seeing us. I tried to bring my 2-year-old daughter with us today, but at the time we left her, she was naked and screaming through the house. So it might have had the opposite effect of what I was hoping. Anyway, thank you again for seeing us, and I've got a written statement here I'd like to read.
Certainly.
We are here today because we respectfully disagree with the Heritage Preservation Review Board's denial of our request to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the historically relevant windows installed in our home. While it is accurate We have a map for you of the historic district, if anyone is unfamiliar with.
Yep.
Oh, you guys?
We've got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
While it is accurate that 715 Drainsville is within the Historic Preservation District, it is important to note that our home is isolated on the edge of the Van Vleck's addition and just across the street from Worcester Street, where there is no historic homes present. We are not on Eldon or Vine Street, which is the true epicenter of the Heritage District. The minor change in our windows in no way disrupts the continuity of the Heritage District. Our windows were replaced for several reasons. Most importantly, they posed a grave safety risk to our young family as they did not open adequately to provide a means of egress from the structure. It was also believed that they contained lead paint, which, as you know, can be a severe health risk to young children. In addition to the safety concerns, we had an energy audit of the home performed, and the windows were listed as a major loss of energy. We began by looking for a contractor who could restore wood windows, but of the 4 or 5 contractors we spoke to, not only did none of them restore old windows, none of them could even recommend a contractor who could. Frankly, when asked, even the town staff was unfamiliar with anyone who could be of help. Restoring old windows is a dying art form. As such, we determined that the best course of action was to replace the windows. The estimate for new wood windows for the house was approximately $30,000. Which was not economically feasible for our young family. The windows currently installed were approximately $10,000 and generously purchased by my father. We'd like to provide you with some pictures which will demonstrate how minor the overall change in appearance is. And frankly, you'll probably notice the, go ahead.
Am I allowed to approach?
Sure. Be brave.
Frankly, you'll notice that probably notice more the change of season in the pictures, vice necessarily the change to the windows.
If you could give that to the clerk for the record.
One of my favorite pictures is actually, I'm sorry, I only have one copy, but is the picture of the before and after. So we did extensive renovations to the interior of the home where we put in an HVAC system, which now removed the need for these windowed AC vents.
Yeah.
And also took off the non-period storm windows, which were on the window. I'm sorry, I guess I'll start with over here.
Okay.
Only portions of the home are believed to be original, and not all of the windows are considered historically relevant. In accordance with staff comments during the HPRB work session, only a few windows need to be addressed. The additions and modifications that have been made over the years have decreased the historic appearance of the house. For example, you'll notice that the house is wrapped in vinyl siding. Also, the windows were already encased in vinyl prior to our purchase of the property. We merely made a change to the sash and the muntin. The bay window and bump out is an exception. It is our understanding that since it was a later addition, it is not required to reform to heritage guidelines. With due consideration of the economic feasibility of putting in wood windows, the fact that the home as a whole is not considered historically relevant, several modifications made prior to the purchase of its property should impact the decision as to whether a minor change to muntin on the windows could be allowed. Additionally, we are aware that in 2014, the Fairfax County Circuit Court ruled that not only could modern building materials be considered, but cost is absolutely a factor in the HPRB decisions. We recognize that we went outside the process and sincerely apologize for it. However, if the process was not as onerous and painful as it is, it would not have been necessary. The HPRB recommendation of only wood windows for our home would provide undue financial hardship to my family, and we would argue are not required specifically by the existing guidelines. When we were here last in December of 2014, Madam Mayor instructed the town staff to expedite the revision of the HPRB guidelines. In 3 years, what forward progress has been made? You have a town full of people willing to assist in revising the guidelines. My wife, Sarah, reached out to town staff to volunteer to sit on the guidelines revision board. Bryce on town staff asked if I wanted to be on the revision board, and I volunteered. Richard Downer has frequently volunteered his time, yet here we are. We are looking for a peaceful and economically feasible solution within a reasonable amount of time. It is for all of these reasons that we humbly and respectfully request that a certificate of appropriateness be issued for our existing windows. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we are going to call on Community Development to come forward with their information, and then we will have questions for both staff and the Murphys. So thank you. Mr. Rosell.
Well, thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm basically just going to give a brief overview of my staff report, hitting the highlights as well as I go through. I'm going to address a couple comments that Mr. Murphy made, and at the end of my presentation, I'm going to introduce and have come forward the chairman of the HPRB, Robert Walker, to say a few words, and then also our historic preservation architect that's on the board to give you the board's consideration of this application. But as you know, the HPRB, back on its April 17th meeting, voted not to issue a certificate of appropriateness to approve the removal of the wood windows in the house that were previously installed vinyl windows on the house, which Mr. Murphy addressed in his presentation. The house is a contributing structure in the district as opposed to a non-contributing structure that was built later. The house, according to our Historic District Architectural Survey form, was probably built somewhere back 1880 to about 1900, somewhere in that time frame. The board stated at the meeting that the application did not conform to the standards outlined in the town zoning ordinance, and as I've said before, with the HPRB, we have standards both in the zoning ordinance and then in the guidelines. So I'll address both of those. Like I said, the board stated that the application did not meet the standards in the zoning ordinance. I listed those three standards on page 3, top of page 3 in my staff report. Basically, those were whether or not there was reasonable effort be made to alter the site, building a structure with a minimum extent practical. The board did not believe that criteria or that standard was met. Whether or not the alteration of the existing or the original distinguishing characters of the building and the removal of the alteration of any historic material or distinctive architectural features shall be avoided to the greatest extent possible. Again, the board did not believe that standard was met. And whether or not deteriorated architectural features shall be repaired rather than replaced. And if replacement is necessary, then the new material shall match the material being replaced in composition, design, color, texture, and other visual qualities to the greatest extent practical. And again, the board said that standard wasn't met because the proposed vinyl, or the installed vinyl windows did not meet those standards in regard to the replaced wood windows. The board also further reviewed the application in regard to the guidelines, and the guidelines in two areas the board felt were not met. That the guidelines say that do not change the architectural appearance of windows with inappropriate materials or finishes, which radically change the sash, the depth of the reveal, the mutton configuration, and the reflective quality of the glass or the appearance of the frame. Each one of those cases, by installing the vinyl windows, the vinyl window does not meet any of that criteria because the sash was changed on the window. It's much thicker, bulkier. The depth of the reveal between the glass and the edge of the window, the sash, is much narrower than it is on a true wind window. The mutton configuration is totally different. The mutton pattern on the wood windows have the muttons attached to the outside of the window. The vinyl window has flat muttons placed between two pieces of glass, so that the mutton pattern is entirely different. And then the reflective quality of old glass and new glass is just different. I think that's just a fact of life with the new windows. In fact, the older windows from much greater time period, those are the really easy ones to tell the difference because they're not real clear. They're not perfect like the windows are now. So The board felt in all those cases, the vinyl windows did not meet that criteria. The next area, the guidelines that the board felt that were not met were regarding retaining features and materials that are important in defining the overall historic character of buildings, such as windows. As we talked before, windows are one of the more defining character items in the building or in a house. The guidelines go on to say, do not radically change elements such as windows, roofs, or porches that are important in defining the overall historic architectural character of the building. And again, the board felt that the proposed or the installed vinyl windows did not meet these standards. We talked a bit about retaining traditional materials for the building and how they contribute to the context of historic Herndon, and it's really a vital objective of the board to continue that and to look at maintaining particularly contributing structures in the building, and that the correct period materials are used, and that still remains a primary goal of the board, and they maintain that through the different reviews of applications that they see through the year. So I think I'm gonna stop there after going through the criteria. Like I said at the beginning of my presentation, I'd like to introduce Robert Walker, who's the chairman of the HPRB, and then he'll be followed by Matt Osolinsky, who's our historic preservation architect on the board.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Walker.
Evening. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I'll be very brief. We did, as a board, try to follow the guidelines in the zoning ordinance, and hope that we did. I do have a disagreement with Mr. Murphy about his representation of the circuit court's case in the and the cost. It's not so black and white that cost is to be considered. It's a financial decision over all aspects. And finally, we did try to work with these homeowners to reach some compromise that would preserve the historic aspects of the house, but also would meet their needs, desires, and resources. And were rebuffed on all of our proposals, and so we were left with sort of a black or white decision, yes or no, and they chose to do what they did. Thank you. And Mr. Osolinsky is much more able to talk about the preservation details.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Osolinsky.
Mayor Merkel, if I could just say
sure.
one quick
Absolutely.
thing, just to add to what Mr. Walker said about the financial component of the review. And the court case that Mr. Murphy cited in 2014 was in regard to a roof replacement. The only financial consideration that's discussed in the guidelines is regarding roofs. There are no other sections of the guidelines that takes into consideration of the cost of the improvement. So it's just in regard to roofs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Osolinsky.
Hi. Before I start, I just want to thank you all for appointing me to the body. I don't think I've ever had a chance to say thank you. It's been a pleasure to serve and to serve with my fellow members. Do I need to introduce myself? I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Do I need to introduce myself formally for the record?
I think we know who you are.
Okay, fine. The applicant is proposing that new vinyl windows have a similar appearance to the original wood windows, and thereby justify the removal of those windows and their accompanying storm windows and the replacement with vinyl. I'd like to talk to you about the role that materials play and why replacing historic fabric with vinyl is not appropriate to these windows in this house under these historic guidelines. Appropriate alternative materials are welcomed by the HPRB and are acceptable and have been approved within our historic guidelines. As an example, we routinely accept concrete siding and composite rails and balustrades as appropriate alternative modern materials for the fronts of houses. Our guidelines don't allow inappropriate materials that radically change the appearance of the various small elements of windows, such as sashes, glass, sash depth, sash width, muntin appearances, and a myriad of things. We sometimes approve vinyl windows at the rear, but not in the front of a contributing structure. Why do we consider vinyl windows as inappropriate, and vinyl in general? Vinyl ages poorly. It yellows over time. It expands and contracts 7 times more than wood or fiberglass, so cracks develop over the course of several annual cycles of seasons changing. It degrades gradually over time under sunlight and ultraviolet rays. It holds its own static charge that attracts and holds dust and dirt. Vinyl is not as strong as wood or fiberglass, and therefore the material must be thicker in profile for sashes and frames. Conversely, because the material is rolled, the plane of the glass is routinely set closer to the forward plane of the sash, as Mr. Osell mentioned. It makes for a thinner appearance and less shadow cast by the sash and muntins onto the plane of glass than wood windows. In this case, the muntins that are in the window cast no shadow because they don't project from the face of the glass the same way that wood or wood-clad or even fiberglass windows do. The muntins are between the panes of glass. Similarly, vinyl siding, for example, bends inward over time. Coatings that protect vinyl siding fade over time. And the joints in vinyl siding overlap, causing shadows, vertical shadows, to happen in 2 row patterns. So for all these reasons, we don't feel that vinyl as a material is appropriate to either windows or siding, as a matter of fact. It's been said that Herndon is not comparable to Old Town or Georgetown or even historic Vienna, and that our so-called warts justify looser interpretations and lower standards. Speaking for myself, I actually agree with that statement. As an architect, I've done work in Old Town and Georgetown, as well as 6 other historic districts. This morning I counted them. I assure you that Herndon is already significantly less rigorous than those boards. To name a few circumstances, I can say this with certainty that given comparable situations, those districts would not, for example, approve PVC balustrades or the specific thinness of the concrete siding that we routinely approve for house fronts here. In this particular case, during our working session with the applicant, we offered to consider a compromise proposal if they would be willing to give us one. We suggested avenues toward that compromise, but they declined. So I think to go even further, and under the idea of we are not Georgetown, allow both the destruction of historic fabric and allow its replacement with these vinyl windows on this house, on this main street, will degrade the meaning of our historic district and weaken the effectiveness of the historic guidelines themselves. Further, to do it retroactively, following repeated public notice to the applicant by our board and your council to obtain approval prior to replacement would compound the problems. I can sympathize with the Murphy's story of an uninformed member of her family who didn't know of the previous HPRB and town council actions pertaining to them. I can even sympathize with the desire to spend a bulk of their money on the interior and save that money from the exterior windows. And I can sympathize with the chaotic circumstances of having that much broader house renovation and subsequently marketing the house for sale scheduled during and after a pregnancy. But to consider our sympathy for personal circumstances as a basis would be to grant the applicant a privilege that is unwarranted and risk precedent for future approvals based on a myriad of circumstances that people that we may relate to sympathetically and deny others to whom we may not. This district is unique in this metropolitan area. It pays tribute to a heritage of small-town America, to a one-time farming community gathered around a train depot to engage in commerce, worship, and community. It is different and smaller and less prestigious than Georgetown, yes, but its American story is no less valuable, no less worthy of boast, and no less warranting of preservation than any of those more sophisticated and wealthy origins. There are plenty of examples of homeowners in Herndon of no greater means than the Murphys who reflect exactly that in their efforts to rehab their homes. I urge you to support the story of Herndon, to support the maintenance and preservation of its historic fabric that gives testament to that story, and support the HRB resolution on this matter.
Thank you. Mr. Osell, did you have anything further?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. One moment. I'm going to allow the council to ask questions of the applicant or the staff. Are there questions at this time, or do we want to hear more?
I have a
Mr.
question.
McKenna.
Sorry about that. In regards to I'm more concerned about the process itself, and that what transpired in regards to I watched the hearing from that point on in regards to resolution. Obviously, there was a denial. What recourses were made in regards to giving them any discussion or anything after that? Was there anything discussed? Was anything offered after the meeting? What happened after the first meeting?
Councilman McKenna, to whom are you directing the question? Point of order.
I apologize to Mr. Osell.
After the meeting in December, where the council heard the appeal and upheld the board in their decision not to issue the certificate of appropriateness, the council referred the matter back to the board. At the council meeting, at the appeal meeting, the Murphys presented a different window than what had been presented to the board. So the council referred the matter back to the board to look at that window.
Remand based on new evidence.
Yes.
Correct.
I was out of the office at the time, so I wasn't at the public hearing or shortly thereafter. Another member of the staff met with Murphys to discuss moving forward, coming to another board meeting. Just explain what needed to be submitted, and that was the last contact we had with them for quite a while after that.
Okay, it seems that you have more to add, so I would like to respectfully give you that opportunity before we ask more questions.
Can I start? I just wanted to speak to the chairman's and Mr. Osolinsky's idea about the compromise. There was some talk during the work session. Mr. Osell seemed to be presenting some area for compromise, which I was very open to. I did not get the sense that the board was open to any sort of compromise. It seemed that they were going to bring it to the meeting. At the meeting, I was not comfortable trying to engage in that discussion because I had no idea what the cost would be. We are still in a situation where we can't agree to something that we can't afford. So I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't that I was trying to not compromise. I got there was not a lengthy discussion at the work session that I felt that I would have been happy to compromise at that point. But I was not comfortable compromising in front of the whole group. I couldn't agree to something at that time without talking to my husband and finding out what a cost like that would be. So I just wanted to clarify that from my perspective. And then just to talk to Mr. Osell's point now, that we were at the original town council meeting that Dan attended, we did not talk to anybody after that. That it was a full year, and the windows had been installed before I met with you about the change.
Councilman McKenna, if you review the video from the 2014 town council session, Madam Mayor remanded the decision back to town staff and instructed the staff to expedite the process of revising the guidelines.
Okay. That is correct, and we asked the applicant to go back to the HPRB to discuss the new windows, because there was a new, I remember Mr. Kirby sitting right there said, hey, those don't look like the same windows. Did that ever happen? Did the applicants come back to the HPRB to discuss those windows prior to installing the windows that are currently in the home?
No, they did not.
Thank you.
And just a point of clarification, if I could, the minutes from that council meeting where the council heard the appeal, when you referred it back to the board, and actually the mayor, you requested the staff to move forward with the HPRB guidelines as soon as possible and meet with the applicants to discuss the next steps in the process of the application. Those were the two things that you added to the remand.
Correct, and we have been going through the process of rewriting the guidelines, and are in the midst of that. Is much more complicated than any of us anticipated, and we are moving forward with that. A couple of work sessions ago, we had a briefing from our consultant, which I won't get into a lot of detail here, but that is ongoing. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we ask questions to clarify with you and with our staff and board members?
Yes, ma'am. Just quick responses to some comments. You will see from this the transcript, as well as Mr. Oslinski, did I say that name right? Oslinski. See from this transcript of the meeting last month that one of the reasons the HPRB denied our application is because they did not want to set a precedent for allowing vinyl windows, but a precedent had already been set via the 3 examples provided to the council in which the HPRB had approved vinyl windows and contributing structures. What was some of the other? Vinyl windows versus wood. You have the example, the evidence in front of you. Those wood windows are severely deteriorated, and vinyl retains its shape. I'm not a historic architect, but from what I've been told by the multiple windows contractors I have spoken to, vinyl retains its shape, form, and function for far longer. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, I just want to make sure that you had ample opportunity. I wanted to ask a question about precedent, or probably Mr. Davidson was about to ask that, so I'll defer to Mr. Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to address this question to the town attorney. What I'd like to ask is, in the materials and evidently just referred to, there might be other situations that were similar to this. To what extent do they set a precedent that we would consider in our deliberations here tonight?
Well, the word precedent is thrown around quite a bit, and we're not always precise about what we mean by that. A legal precedent, which I think is what we're talking about here, but maybe not all using the same definition of, is one that would rely on all facts or factors being same or similar in reaching a result. The situation that I'm aware of with the other vinyl windows in the town may not involve the same set of factors, the same considerations, probably don't. Each situation involving a historic structure is different. So to the extent that they might be legal precedent for the board to consider, I doubt they are. But in order to be that, that would need to be presented to the board factor by factor to show that they are that the situation is exactly the same. Now, we can point and say there are vinyl windows used, but my guess is, although I'm not sure, that it was a different situation and it met the guidelines. As Mr. Osolinsky has said, it met the guidelines in that particular case. Does that answer your question?
I have a second, if I may.
Sure.
For a purpose here tonight, we are considering what's in evidence tonight or what's available to us and not anything else. Is that correct?
Correct. You have to consider the board's decision and whether the board's decision was in accordance with the guidelines and the evidence that you have was before them, as well as what's presented here today. And the only thing that can be different is if there's something new, like, you know, the situation in the past where there were new set of windows.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the council for staff or the HPRB members or the Murphys?
Yes.
Ms. Vice Mayor.
Let's see. Okay, so I wrote a bunch of stuff. Let me figure out where my questions are. Let's see. So the home as a whole is a contributing structure. I feel like the applicant said it wasn't, but I do know it is not only within the district, but is a contributing structure. Okay, you're good with that. One thing that was new to me tonight that maybe I didn't, reading through all the documents, something about, so part of the windows had already been changed to vinyl. I think you spoke to that. And I also wanted to know when the siding was put on, just a separate thing, just because.
So
Maybe start with the easy one. Do you know when the siding was put on? It was before
it was before we
before the district was established?
No.
We don't know.
Or we don't know?
Before they purchased the home.
Before you purchased the home?
Mr. Osell may know.
I was going to say, when the survey was done in 1987, it notes that there was vinyl on
It was
the
already
house.
vinyl siding at that point. Okay, just curious, not totally relevant, but curious. Okay, so sorry, back to the,
Windows question, ma'am.
yes.
So the vinyl siding encompasses the outside of the windows.
Mm-hmm.
So that part of the window is not actually replaced. That is still before, I mean, even if we went back and replaced them with wood, that would still be encompassed in vinyl. Does that answer your question, ma'am? The part of the vinyl siding encompasses part of the window, such that the wood portions of the wood window are in fact vinyl.
Had already been covered because of the vinyl siding.
Yes, ma'am.
But the window itself, nothing had been changed to the window itself until you replaced
The
it.
muntin specifically, ma'am. The window, the frame, everything remains. All we did was pop out
Yeah.
the inside and put in a new interior.
Okay. And thank you. And so I have another question, I think probably is for you, Mr. Osell. So you talked about there are several changes: sash change, depth of reveal, mutton pattern, and certainly the mutton pattern is dramatically different. That's an easy visual. But you also talked about the glass, and certainly I know, like, there's some old houses on Eldon that you can tell have the really, really old glass. I'm trying to think of a good example. But anyway, I can't think of one. So,
A couple of the doors on my house.
I know,
have it, but
and you have some too.
probably didn't want to call me out.
But if you were to buy brand new windows today, right, is there a difference in the glass if you were to buy a wood window versus a vinyl window? The glass. I would think there's not, but I just wanted to clarify that because you talked about that as a change as well. Because I get the sash, the depth, the mutton pattern, but would there also be a change to the glass, or maybe it's where the mutton is in vinyl versus wood? I just wanted to understand that. Or maybe that's for you,
So
Mr. Olins.
So your question is there a difference
In the
between
glass.
that would go in a new wood window
Yes.
versus a vinyl
Yes,
window?
that's my question.
And Mr. Osolinsky probably has more experience with that than I do, and how much, if you could address that?
Sorry.
The answer is it depends.
Okay.
Vinyl windows, being lower cost windows, will have a limited range of glass and theoretically at least a less expensive manner of getting that glass. That said, and there would be a limited, if not a single option for that glass.
Okay.
Glass today is typically coated for energy conservance.
Efficiency.
And it's what's called a low E coating, and there's some other kinds of dash E brand names to it. But that low E coating will give a certain reflectance to it. You can put the low E coating on different surfaces of the 4 surfaces that a double pane glass has, resulting in different appearances of that glass. I think we may have all seen, if we care to look closely, glass that has a little bit of waviness of color, not waviness of glass like old glass, but waviness of color to that glass. That is a possibility in the low-end windows more than a higher-end window. In a typical historically compatible window made by a manufacturer such as Pella or Marvin, Weather Shield, I mean I could go on and on and on, they will give you options of how many of these coatings you want in the glass, how many what kind of, if you want bronzing to happen. The more coatings that you have on a glass, the more energy efficient the window as a whole will be. And frequently, when you have a lower and a cheaper window, they will put more coatings on the glass to make up for the lack of rating in the accommodated by the frame itself and the wind tightness of the window. So there are certain, in order to meet certain standards of the industry, Energy Star, for example, they less expensive or less well-built windows, let's call it that, less well-built windows will up the coatings that they put in order to achieve the rating. So
perfect. So let me I'll do one more follow-up to that then. So typically today's wood windows, which are higher quality, often the glass of those wood windows typically or could look more like the glass from the original windows.
More than other glasses,
Okay.
yes, you'd have the opportunity. You could even spec in those brands I mentioned not to have any low E coating, to have clear, absolutely clear glass that would more accurately do that. But the other thing to say is that it is difficult today to get a pane of glass to look exactly like a historic pane of glass.
Right.
I mean, no, we're not talking to that level. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult.
That's super helpful. And I think given that there's the other changes that I just wanted that minor clarification, and it's Harlan and Midge Reese's house. That's what I was trying to think of. So I have another question probably for our town attorney. If we were to choose to remand this back to the board, could one of the compromises based on what Mr. Walker talked about be potential for the compromise that they replace only some of the windows? Or is this a question I should ask you, or I should ask Mr. Walker?
I'm thinking you probably should ask me. It sounds procedural, and I'll be happy to try to answer.
So if we were to choose to remand, with the intent that potentially a compromise, so that they, or I guess would we need to remand if? Okay, let me say it this way.
This board can't make a decision on what they can or can't do.
Understood. But if we said that we that we don't support the appeal, the homeowners still have the right to go back to the HPRB without us remanding it?
You asked me a few different questions.
I know,
Let me start by explaining what you can do, and maybe that'll help you help me frame the answer for you. You can affirm, reverse, or modify, or remand. But to remand, you need to find there's some new information that was not before the board. If you reverse or modify, you need to find that the board did something that was not in accordance with the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So without knowing what you're thinking or what the entire body may find, I think it would be premature to answer your question in the way you wanted me to.
My non-legal counsel, my non-legal self trying to ask you this question. No, what you just said was exactly what I needed to better understand. Let me just look if there's other things. I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for anyone? Ms. Friedrichs?
So I'm hypersensitive to cost. There you go. It has to be read? Oh, goodness. Okay, so I'm hypersensitive to cost, and I'm very sympathetic to that. But I guess my question is, after your father or father-in-law,
My father, her father-in-law.
the gentleman in question, installed the windows without asking you, did you come back to the board and try to resolve that?
No, we did not.
Okay. And this is a question for Mr. Osell. Is the Murphys referred to the fact that they are situated on the outer edge of the historic preservation district. Is that relevant?
It is not, because all the structures in the district all contributed to the district. There's not, the ones on the edge are no more, no less contributing
Okay.
or important to the district than the ones downtown here.
Okay. And I guess the value of our historic downtown wasn't as apparent to me until pretty recently. And now when I look at the pictures that the Murphys have given me, I see glaringly the problem. Is there any way to that's probably another one of those questions. I'm sorry. Despite the
Council
fact
member,
that,
you can certainly ask the question you want to ask.
Okay. All right.
She just might not answer it.
Well, now, since I couldn't remember Councilmember McKenna's name, and now I've forgotten what I was going to ask, is it another question about relevance? The HPRB rules have been discussed numerous times. Do people still have to abide by them while we're rewriting them?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
They are in the zoning ordinance, they are the law of the town
Okay.
until they are changed.
Okay. So I guess that answers the questions I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Olam?
Okay, I was present when we had the hearing back in 2014, and I did go back and watch the HPRB meeting recently, and at the hearing in 2014, it was remanded specifically so that we could look into these windows. And there never was another meeting set. So what I need to know from you is, what is it that you can tell me that the HPRB did inappropriately? If you want me, I'm not going to remand it, because we tried that before and it never happened, and there is no new material to remand. If I'm going to reverse it, you've got to tell me what evidence there is that their decision was not correct.
So, ma'am, there is, so first, back in 2014, when it was remanded back to the HPRB, my understanding was town staff was supposed to reach out to us. They never did. Granted, I sort of dug my heels in because I was a little frustrated at the time. I was waiting for them. We actually spoke to Michael Riley. Michael Riley, legal counsel, who informed me that it was on, the burden was on town staff to reach out to us in order to reset a time in order to address our window situation. Now, what they did inappropriately, in my opinion, is reviewing the HPRB guidelines. It does not specifically stipulate that replacement windows have to be wood. And based on their previous decisions, we're not calling it precedent, but based on their previous decisions, they have allowed vinyl windows in the past. So a stoic refusal of considering vinyl windows was inappropriate. And I think that is the crux of what we are trying to get to. And then my wife. Anything?
I'm
Okay.
just trying to make sure that I've got my head.
I think that's
Ms.
the
Olam.
crux.
Okay, I mean, I listened, I heard. In fact, one of the board members is in a historic house, and they take great pains to make sure that it is still historic, and they even admitted that they didn't like having to do all that and the cost involved. And I know that the case in Fairfax County in 2014, there were lots of homeowners that have spent lots of money doing that. So, I mean, it's if you're in an HOA and they tell you have to pay the dues to help support the swimming pool, but you don't use it, you still have to pay the dues. So
Ma'am,
if you're
there's
in
a
a
difference between-
historic, or you can move, but I just needed to know exactly what they did that you think was inappropriate. So
Yes, ma'am.
what I'm hearing is you just didn't like the
Well,
answer.
well, no, it's more that from our perspective, not as historical architects, that to us it doesn't look that different. So because it's not specifically wood, and it does seem that there is some latitude in the board's ability to make decisions, that we feel that these windows could be accepted, as opposed to a flat out no. I also just, since you brought up the HOA thing, when we
Well,
purchased
HOAs are very different from
Yeah,
historic district.
But, and you know when you're buying a house that you're in an HOA. We were given no disclosure that this house would have to conform to this high set of guidelines. This is, I didn't want to bore you with all of that. Mr. Osolinsky kind of referred to my sob story from the HPRB, and I just since I have the mic, I'm going to put it out there that we have had to stop my father-in-law in the last 2 months from just going to Home Depot and putting wood windows in on the front. I had to sit him down twice and say, no, you cannot do that. That is the whole point. There is a process that we have to go through, and that's just kind of how he is. So I don't expect that to sway you. I'm just trying to say we're not like these delinquents that we're trying to.
When we bought the house, Mr. Osell did tell me specifically that we were in the historic district. There was no book provided to me to indicate exactly what that meant. There's a difference between paying $300 a month for a pool fee, and $30,000 to replace your windows instead of 10 to maintain a historic home.
Specifically, our contractor said, well, Herndon is a historic district, but your house is wrapped in vinyl siding, so it can't be that bad. So that's kind of what we were working under. I will say we did not do any due diligence and try to investigate further. We were very excited about the house. We were trying to, we thought it was going to be a good move for our family. And as Mr. Osolinsky also referred, the house is on the market because it has not been a great move for our family, and we are trying to move out of the historic district so that we do not have to, that's just not our thing. We're not into historic homes. We didn't realize what it was going to entail. So we're trying to rectify this error before we move around the corner. We do like Herndon, we're staying, but we just can't do the historic.
Okay. Any other questions, Madam Town Attorney? Are you trying to get my attention? No? Okay. No. Other questions for staff, the Murphys, or our HPRB board members? Okay. Then we will go to the audience for comments. You have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. When the red light comes on, please wrap up. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Laura McMurdy. I live at 1017 Tyler Street. It's in the Historic District. And today I watched a video on Brown Morton III when he spoke May 20th, 2014 at UVA, recorded by C-SPAN on the significance of the 1966 National Historic Preservation Act. And he was the one who crafted the standards the national standards, and he spoke of the challenge of crafting those standards that would be applicable for both Guam and Providence, Rhode Island. And that he worked very hard with Gary Hume to use a one-size-fits-all language for flexibility. And that they used phrases such as whenever possible. And how over time, with subsequent revisions of the standards, whenever possible was replaced by the words must or shall, turning the 10 standards of historic preservation into the 10 commandments. He also said he was not Moses. And he said that also over time that the meaning was lost, that this whenever possible got turned into must or shall, so that poorly prepared staff, and these are his words, which I think are harsh, poorly educated staff, often poorly paid staff, would look at the standards and say, oh no, has to be wood windows. The standards say no vinyl, must be wooden windows, shall be wooden windows. I urge you all to watch this video. You can Google it before you make your decision. He speaks about preservation, restoration. He talks about what the intent was of the original standards, about preserving history, how instead of, it's not about Mount Vernon, it is about the buildings here in Herndon, and about how to use the standards as guidelines for having a conversation. We have new materials now. They look good. They're available. They weren't written. They weren't available when those standards were written. The book I was given when I moved in 1997, which I don't think the guidelines have been updated since then, the copyright was 1989.
Can you please wrap up?
Yes. So I would hope that you would vote to approve their windows, and I would also ask that you ask the town, and especially the Heritage Preservation Board, to Google Brown Morton III and watch the video.
Thank you. Who else would like to come forward? Mr. Downer, followed by Mr. Munt.
Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council, my name is Richard Downer. I live at 216 Herndon Station Square, soon to be 815 Branch Drive, condo number 308. And a lot of pain going between there. It's not fun downsizing, I can assure you. I am a treasurer of the Herndon Historical Society, but I'm speaking as a private citizen. It's not for the board. I did serve 13 years on the ARB before we had an HPRB, and was one of the ones who was very instrumental in seeing that was done, that the ARB was done, and also some modifications to the HPRB so we didn't have to go through 2 submissions if you were in a commercial district. I think the main thing we have to realize on this house, this particular house, it's a very eclectic house. It is not pure. Jack Slevitz, I knew him personally. He did some remodeling for me. The original owners, the house, the Slevitzes, we were not the original owners, but were owners of it. And his wife worked at our insurance agency. There were windows added. There were things done to the house. As it was mentioned, the vinyl siding was put on. The vinyl runs all the way up to the edge of the window. I mean, the face of the window. It's included in that. I think There are times to fall on your sword for certain things, and this is not one of them, very frankly, in my opinion. Now, the Murphys have apologized for the fact that John, who I know well, who was our next-door neighbor or backyard neighbor just a short time ago, and they are moving to Mankin Estates in Herndon. Okay, so they are having a house built up by Elma Mankin's property, so they're not leaving Herndon. But I think it's very important to realize that the house is an eclectic house. It was done. It's vinyl all over the house right now. When you're 10 feet away from the house, you can't tell the difference. In fact, you can't tell the difference if you're 5 feet away from the house. I was just up there this evening and looked at it. There is, well, we need to revise our guidelines. We've been talking about it for a long time, and in my opinion, they should be granted a certificate of appropriateness because of the overall improvement that they have made to the house. No screens. I'll go fast. I see it, Madam Mayor. No screens. No the window units, which are the 50s and 60s. They've spent a lot of money on this house, interior and exterior, but the exterior is what we're dealing with tonight. And the overall improvement of the house is outstanding, and that's what really counts. And I hope you will do option 2, I believe it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mund.
Madam Mayor, Town Council, first of all, I'm General Retired Steve Mund. And I'm saying that because I appreciate what you did earlier this evening and I was not here for. But more importantly, it's because I came to speak tonight because I tried to go to the Historic Review Board, and I went to the work session, and then I went to the actual the meeting where they heard. Because at the work session, I was told I couldn't speak because I was not one of the people preparing. At the actual meeting, I was told I couldn't speak because I wasn't speaking directly to a specific issue that was being asked. So I came tonight to the council because I am concerned about the procedures that were mentioned, and I'm concerned about the process and how you go about it. What I notice as I go through the city is we have a number of historical homes. And what I was trying to talk to the Historical Review Board about was that we have a number of homes that are slowly falling apart. And we do nothing to preserve those in advance. We watch the chimneys start to tilt. We watch the siding begin to degrade. We watch the windows break down and doors and other things, and we do nothing. And then when you have people who come in, like I did, I bought in the historical section. I didn't know that. There was nobody from Mr. Dahl who gave me a book and said, you are now in this section. Here's the things you must do. Oh, by the way, none of my windows are wood, because it was a new build home. When you look at the new fire station, that's not built to any standard within the historical section. It doesn't look like an old fire station. It looks like a new fire station. We ought to be proud of it, but it ought to be part of the community. I would say the same is true with the new townhouses that we're building. And so we've got to at least have some semblance of order on how we're going about this process. And so I'm here tonight to tell you that I will volunteer to be on that committee, to go back and review those pieces. And I think in the case when you buy a home that's been wrapped in vinyl siding and nobody really sits there, and I watched the way Ms. Murphy came in and presented her case, and she apologized to the Historical Review Board, and it is kind of where it is, and the question is now, what do we do about it? My recommendation is that we approve and let them have their windows. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward and speak on this appeal item? Come on down. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Tim Bonnet, 904 Eldon Street. I live in the Historic District. I have a beautiful 99-year-old historic home, catty corner from the mayor. We're neighbors. I moved here 5 years ago. I rented for 4 years. Within a few months of living here, I knew this is where I wanted to live, and I couldn't wait to buy a home, and I wanted a historic home. The HB Guide was written and adopted in 1989, almost 30 years ago, and has not been revised since. It's outdated and unrealistic. The 3-decade-old guidelines have not been consistently applied, and they are in fact very much subjectively applied. Everywhere you look, there's exceptions. Asphalt roofs on 150-year-old homes. Vinyl windows on some homes are not. Vinyl siding on some homes are not. It's completely subjective. The purpose of the guide and the designation of Herndon as a historic heritage area was to preserve the unique and lovely nature of our town. However, the subjectivity of its application has had an unintended consequence. Rather than preserve our historic homes, we are in fact causing an environment that are allowing them to rot in place. That's what the retired general's statement was. I walked down Eldon Street on the way here, and there are several homes that are literally rotting in place. Gutters are falling off, large sections of rotten siding and framing members showing through, rusted and dilapidated roofs, and other structures that do not bring a sense of pride to me or my fellow Herndon citizens. And this is on the main thoroughfare through our town. We have rules and standards for making changes to the historic homes, but absolutely no rules or standards for maintaining them. Historic homeowners cannot afford the cost to repair their homes in accordance with the outdated guidelines. New buyers are afraid to purchase homes that are in dire need of repair due to the prohibitive cost of restoring them. I serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and it is not our job to say no to individuals who appeal zoning ordinances. It's quite the contrary. It is our job to make reasonable exceptions, and we do so. The historic homes in Herndon do not belong to the town, and they do not belong to the HPRB. They belong to us, the homeowners. We take on the huge financial responsibility of home ownership. We save up for years to have the down payment. We make huge monthly mortgage payments. We pay very high property taxes, and we are responsible for the high maintenance and the utility costs of our homes. We should have the right to make reasonable changes to our historic homes, including modernizing and improving them using modern materials while maintaining the charm of Old Town Herndon. I concur with the Murphys. I think that a vinyl-wrapped house with vinyl frames around a wood window replaced with vinyl, it makes absolutely no sense to force them to replace those windows, especially, as everybody stated, there are no requirements to disclose to anybody buying in the historic district that, in fact, these are historic homes under the rules. And that is a very big burden to take on when you don't know the fact. And $20,000 is a lot of money. I urge you all to consider providing the certificate of appropriateness for the Murphys. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward on this item? Yes, ma'am.
Barbara Glakis, 935 Barton Oaks Place. I've heard a couple passing references tonight by both the staff and the applicant about a compromise plan, but nobody's talked about that in detail. So I was wondering if the applicant had a new compromise plan to propose, whether or not that might be a basis for remand. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak publicly on this item before we close the public hearing? Okay, I will close the public hearing, move to council level for discussion and action. I would like to ask the town attorney to reiterate what our options are and what criteria we are to consider on this appeal.
Okay, you can affirm the decision of the HPRB, obviously, or you can reverse or modify the decision of the HPRB. But in order to reverse or modify, you need to find that they somehow incorrectly applied the guidelines or misapplied the guidelines. That would be up to you to find that. If you decide to remand this matter, you are to find that there was some new information presented that makes it appropriate to remand it to a board that's already heard it once. Twice. Well, once on this application. I think that's obvious that they've heard it once, they've given it one go, so there would need to be some new information. Those are your choices: affirm, reverse or modify, remand.
Okay. Thank you. And I believe I was slightly out of order. Before closing the public hearing, I should give the Murphys an opportunity for rebuttal. If there's anything you'd like to say following the public comments that you heard. Okay, just want to make sure that we're giving you your full opportunity. Okay, thank you. So we have a closed public hearing and move to council level for discussion and action on this item. Ms. Olam.
Okay. I am move 17G50 to affirm the decision of the HPRB.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor made by Councilmember Olam, seconded by Councilmember Cunningham to affirm the decision of the HPRB. Discussion on the motion. Ms. Olam.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't hear anything new. We already sent this back 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago maybe, for it to be re-looked at. It wasn't, for whatever reason. Windows were put on, and I can tell the difference even from Worcester, that it's a big difference to have the big single pane compared to the old grids that were there. Maybe if they had faux grids, I wouldn't have noticed that, but I did notice it some time ago. And if we want to have a historic district, which I did move to Herndon because we had a historic district, I also knew that we were a town incorporated and I had to pay taxes. And I chose not to live in a historic home simply because my brother's an architect and we had discussions. He's very big on historic homes and renovation. I just didn't think it was something that I could take on. So I understand the grief when people buy a home and no one has disclosed that to them. And I hope that if we keep our historic district, let your friends and neighbors know who that real estate agent was. They certainly know, and I think it's a disservice to their clients. And I can't imagine the house on the outside of my neighborhood at the corner of Spring and Van Buren, which is this beautiful old home, directly across is not historic, and on the other side, it's a three-way street, is a church. So they're right on the outskirts, but it's absolutely a beautiful home with the tin roof, stamped roof, and it just makes Herndon Herndon. And it's part of the reason I wanted to live here, and I love our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cunningham.
This is a really tough one because as a council, we're bound by a very narrow set of legal requirements of what we can and cannot rule on. We, as much as we dislike, some of us, the way the HPRB rules have been applied, that is neither part of this decision. And it's quite illegal for us to rule on that. No matter how much we dislike the fact that your realtor does not have to disclose you're in a historic district, again, it's not relevant to this particular legal decision and is outside the relevance for the legal matter that we're asked to rule on tonight. Those are items that I would like to see addressed separately. I know we have talked, we are in the midst of the HPRB rewrite. I think a lot of the concerns that folk commenters have made about the current guidelines, how they're applied, the lack of incorporation of modern building materials, hopefully will all be addressed. But in the meantime, the current rules do apply, and the time to have made those appeals were at the HPRB, and unfortunately the council is not able to rule on whether or not they agree that the HPRB made the right decision. Again, the town attorney has advised us repeatedly, because we all want to go there, right? Because we want to go there. We're only allowed to decide if the HPRB applied the rules or if there's new decisions that cause us to remand it. And unfortunately, there's no new information that's been presented in the 2.5 years since the original appeal. And I don't see evidence where the HPRB in either case really made a mistake in their original ruling. Whether or not I agree, that's different, but if they did not make a mistake. So legally, I would have a hard time denying this decision or remanding it.
Vice Mayor, followed by Mr. Davidson.
So I agree with Ms. Cunningham in that this is
Hi.
Oh, no, ma'am, I'm just standing up because you're about to issue a judgment.
No, not, we're not. We're just all going to do commentary first. We're not doing that yet. Then we'll just vote, but first it's just commentary. So like Ms. Cunningham said, this is a tough position that we're in. This is like well, I'll speak for myself. This is one of my least favorite things we have to vote on, right? Because homes are people's biggest assets. This is really important to everyone, right? At the same time, our historic district and from what we represent as a council is also really important to us. So these are tough ones. I just want to speak to a few things. So we talked about your realtor not knowing. I agree as well. Like, we should be telling people, unfortunately, Virginia is a buyer beware state. It just is. So unfortunately, realtors don't have to do that. Now, I don't like that. We are certainly working with realtors. We're trying to, as a town, make sure that that doesn't happen again, because that's unfortunate. But that is a tricky spot we're in, right? Because that is the law in Virginia, that they don't have to. We have to do that through the market of just not using those realtors or speaking ill of them if they don't do full disclosure, right? Because that to me is their responsibility, regardless of that law, buyer beware. I guess what I also struggle with this application or this process, your request, is that even though the buyer beware part, you came to us in 2014, right? You did know, you did come in 2014, you did go through the process. So at some point we can't use that factor anymore, right? Because you were aware you owned a historic home. I get it. It's odd to me. It's a vinyl home, but it sounds like the vinyl was probably been on there for 30 or 40 years. I know the intent with the HPRB and with the guidelines is that you keep as much original as possible, especially since we had to start somewhere, and so we started in '89, and so what had already been changed, you start somewhere. But as you go, you try to keep as much consistent and historic as possible, so that when someone does go to replace the vinyl, potentially they will replace it with hardy plank or something that looks more like it did in the early 1900s when this house was built, or 1880. So I know that feels frustrating now, because you're like, I have a vinyl house, vinyl siding house, but that is the intent. I just wanted to state that from having discussions with the HPRB and looking at the guidelines. So after 2014, the other thing about the applicant's statement saying we were waiting for the town to come back to us, to me is not really an acceptable response either, because at some point, right, you did know, and it's great that you had your father and father-in-law that gave you money and just did this. It's surprising to me that someone would replace windows in someone's house without more collaboration and discussion. That's sort of a really intimate thing to just go do to someone's house, but so it happened. But regardless, it does sound like he also knew this was a problem, that there were these challenges. So I feel for you, because now you have these windows that, but there is a process, and I do feel like this board and the council, well, certainly our HPRB, which we appoint, but also this council has a responsibility to uphold what the HPRB guidelines state. I know we've also talked about the fact that they need updating. We all 7 of us, I'm just going to say, agree they need updating, and we've been talking about that for 2.5 years. We've put that in the budget. It is, as Mayor Merkel said, a much longer process than we all thought. We have formed committees, we have consultants, so that is a process, but in the meantime, we certainly have to abide by the rules that we have as fairly as we can. I think the issue that a couple homeowners that spoke brought up about rotting homes, and we have to look at that. You're again, 100% agreement on that, but to me, it's separate than this particular discussion we're having with the Murphys. I think that speaks more to the guidelines and what we're trying to update, and how do we better reach out. What's the town's responsibility to reach out to these homeowners in those districts so that we can get ahead of those things? To me, that's a separate. I certainly commend you. I do appreciate that you're taking care of your home. Again, our homes are our biggest asset, so I appreciate that you're taking care of your home. At the same time, talking about houses on Eldon Street or houses with falling chimneys, to me, is completely separate from what we have to vote on tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Who did I call in next? Mr. Davidson? Okay, I couldn't remember.
Thank you,
Followed by
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Friedrich.
Just to say something just a little bit different, I feel for the Murphys on this case. I understand your pain. I understand what happened. I wish there were some points along in what actually did happen where maybe you could have taken a little different steps or so and not brought us to this night. This night is something that people that I talked to, friends that I told I was going to run for a seat up on this dais, told me there would be nights like this and very difficult decisions. On the other hand, we are bound by the guidelines, whether they're the ones we want or don't want. There is efforts that was started before I was on the council to change those guidelines. I think the point about there's no requirement to maintain your home in Herndon, that's something that separately I'd like to pursue a little bit. I think that's a great point. Another thing is later in the year, in the fall, we will actually be putting together a legislative program. It's basically where the town of Herndon asks Richmond and our representatives in Richmond to take ideas for laws down to Richmond for consideration at that point. They have the ability to change some of those notice requirements that we've been talking about. That's what the option that we have, if I can convince the rest of the council to support me in putting that into our legislative program. So you can look for that in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Friedrichs. Followed by Mr. McKenna. Are you going to speak? Okay.
Yes.
So I feel sympathetic. This is going to be, this is not pleasant, but I feel that that the Murphys had the opportunity to propose something different in between the last HPRB and the current, and I do respect the HPRB's attempt to apply the rules as well as they can. I do feel your pain. The expense and it is appalling. But as an owner of a historic house, and you apparently were told by your contractor that it was a historic house, although your realtor should have told you that as well, I feel really terrible for you. I'm sorry.
Mr. McKenna.
Yeah, I'm just going to do the breadth of the scope that we have, and unfortunately it's extremely narrow, and this is the things that stink about this. And one of the reasons why when we talked about the historic district, I had so much paperwork because I've talked with Old Town Alexandria and different things too, because I do appreciate what's been said by the residents in regards to the HPRB and to improve that. And I probably know more about contributing and non-contributing things than I ever did in my life. But I can tell you that I asked the question in regards to process specifically because I tried to find something in regards to specifically 17-10, which is what we're discussing, and it's not there. And it saddens me because, I know that you're, wonderful people and great people. But just based on the scope that we have, like to talk about the different kinds of windows and things of that nature, but specific to the resolution at hand, that's not the scope, and the scope is what was done. And this is the thing that stinks the most. So unfortunately, I'm going, I have to affirm just based on the scope that we have, but just know that we are working, and General, you're a neighbor of mine. I have tons of paperwork. We can definitely talk about, what needs to be done, because I'm more than glad to step to that. But I think this is something we have to resolve, and at the same time, what we have now, we have to do what we have to do. So I apologize for that, but that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to summarize based on items that are relevant to the decision that we're trying to make here tonight. There's a lot of emotion and a whole lot of emotional factors that have gone into a lot of the comments tonight that are not really relevant to the decision we have to make. I do want to talk about the disclosure by realtors. I was appalled that was not required, and it is not. We have been working, I have been working personally with realtors to try and get that to be something that they say that they will do. Mr. Davidson mentioned the General Assembly. Town Attorney and I have talked in depth about this, trying to get the General Assembly to require that as a disclosure, because it seems ridiculous to me that it would not be. And as a town, we are working to try and be more proactive in reaching out to our owners of historic structures to remind them that they're in the district, offer help, offer tips, those sorts of things. So there are things that I think that we could do as a town, and also that we're trying to get those that are really buying or selling these homes to be more cognizant of. The HPRB guidelines are in the process of being rewritten. I do anticipate that we will have citizen input on that, and there are many people in this room, including you, Mr. Murphy, that I would love to hear from. I know you and I talked about that quite a while ago when we get to that place. Although I would be shocked if wood windows and contributing structures would be something that was no longer required when the rewrite is done. When this came to us a couple years ago, I can speak for myself personally. I was relieved that you had a new window with you so that we could remand it back to the HPRB, because I was hopeful that there was going to be a compromise where, I'm not on the board, but it seems reasonable to consider wood windows in the original structure, vinyl in an addition. But since that never happened, there was no opportunity for that. When you were asked, did you try to resolve this once your windows were in with the HPRB or with staff? Your answer was no. The compromise wasn't discussed at all. So I think that Mr. McKenna summed it up, that unfortunately the narrow scope that we have here, there's not new information, and I can't find where the HPRB did not uphold their guidelines or apply them correctly. So the course of action, if this is affirmed tonight, Madam Town Attorney, that would be to be appealed to the circuit court, or is it also possible for the Murphys to submit a new application to the HPRB regarding a compromise, or is the only course of action going to the circuit court from this point forward? Because I'd like to be helpful with them moving forward.
I'd defer to Mr. Osell, but I believe if they had a new situation, perhaps they could submit a new application, but he's shaking his head, yes.
Okay.
But on these particular windows, this would be the final decision.
Okay. Did you want to elaborate on that, or did?
Elaborate on my nod?
Yeah. Nod really big? Okay.
Yeah. A subsequent application could be heard by the board.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily have to go, to appeal this decision, it goes to the circuit court, but if there were a new application to discuss a new situation with perhaps vinyl windows remaining on the newer structure and fixing the windows that are most in question on the front of the structure, that would be something that could be considered.
That could be.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this appeal item? Okay, the motion on the floor is made by Councilmember Olem, seconded by Councilmember Cunningham, to affirm the decision of the HPRB on application 17-10. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We, yeah, these are the ones we don't look forward to. The next item is Resolution 17G51 to approve a temporary license agreement to use a designated public space in the alley adjacent to Jimmy's Old Town Tavern. I will open the public hearing and recognize staff from Community Development for this staff report. Ms. Roselle, is that you?
No.
I'm sorry.
Actually, as in the work session, Ms. Burgess is here, and while she would be issuing the actual permit for the use, the item that the council is considering tonight is simply permission for Jimmy's Old Town Tavern to use our property, and that is one of the steps involved in getting the use permit that from the zoning administrator. The owner of Jimmy's has complied with everything absent this one thing. He is requesting that council give him permission to use that property for the dates, the one date indicated on the application. All the information is before the council this evening, and don't believe he's present, but
I don't see him.
We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I'll just ask the same question I asked in the work session for the benefit of anybody in the audience that may not realize. This is something that has happened for many years, and we've realized in the past couple of years that this is something that we should have gone through this process, and it just had never happened. So
I
we're
don't
correcting
think that little strip of property was recognized as belonging to the town in the past. It does
And we
belong
got a
to the
new
town.
lawyer who realized this.
No, actually, it was your CD staff.
Okay, just to clarify that's why this protects the town. It protects the owner of Jimmy's Old Town Tavern and the people that are there.
We do require insurance as the property owner, as well as other assurances through this agreement to use the property, as well as through the use permit.
Gotcha. Okay, are there other questions for any of our staff? Okay, I do not see the applicant, but if you're out there anywhere, here's your chance. No? Jimmy, you're not watching? Okay, then I guess this is a public hearing, and so, or it's not a public hearing, it's a general item, so, no, it is
it's a public hearing.
Yeah.
It's a public hearing. I'm so confused. It is a public hearing. So, is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward on this item? Sorry, the appeal threw me there. No? Okay, seeing none, I will close public hearing, move to council level for discussion and action. Ms. Olam.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of 17G-51.
Second.
Discussion on the motion?
Yes. Sorry, good.
Kudos to staff for seeing that was our property and for making sure that we are protected. If someone were hurt there, it could be possibly a lawsuit to the town, and we wouldn't like that. So thank you for doing that. And I think the event that they have, the rally in the alley and with the Rolling Thunder, is something people really enjoy. And I know I'll be down there, as well as going across to wave the flags along the street for the motorcycles and for Memorial Day.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion? Nope.
Yeah, I think just for context in regards to why that, I believe the street was recognized once the Telex building, when they were looking to annex, they realized that there was an abatement of the street and therefore had to be looked at. So I think that was the crux of it, because it was just buried in years of bureaucracy. So, but yeah, that's just for that context, and I applaud the staff for doing this just to be safe than sorry, because as we know, safety's no accident.
And on that note, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I
That
want an award
motion
in-
carries. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that concludes our agenda this evening.
Madam Mayor, seeing no other business, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And we stand adjourned at 8:47. I can't see that far.